This is Motivation. I'm Laurie Joy Kingwell.
And I'm Krissy Vann. We're two dreamers on two wheels inspired by our community.
And celebrating the voices we're just lucky enough to discover along the ride. So if not already, like, subscribe, follow along, do what you gotta do to not miss an episode.
Just like a well-maintained motorcycle glides smoothly on the road, dodging obstacles with ease and maintaining our mental health allows us to navigate life challenges with resilience and grace. But are we tuning up our minds as often as we should? In Canada and the US, nearly 1 in 5 adults live with a mental health problem or illness in any given year. These numbers aren't just statistics, they represent millions of stories, each underscoring the critical need for regular mental health maintenance. So today, Richelle and Laurie, who had intended on recording an off-road, instead transform the conversation into how to keep their mental engines running smoothly, how to recognize when we might need a tune-up, and the tools and practices that can help us stay on course. And naturally, since it was an off-road and Richelle was stepping in, there are some hilarious moments. This is the Motovation.
Are you?
Oh, I start, I middle, and I end it every day. I love it.
I've never heard such a crisp and vague description of how you are, or a person in general, maybe even.
Yeah, I know.
You've just described how a day goes. A start, a middle, and an end.
It's been lovely.
Gorge.
Yes. We're missing Krissy today.
Taking a little break. It's you and me, Richelle, today.
I love it. That's beautiful. She's been hustling.
She's hustling her muscly biscuits.
You know who I see almost every day now, just by accident? Gavin.
Tell me.
Gavin.
What?
I know.
What? How?
I don't know. Every day I see him. Out and about. He's riding, and he always rides past me, and he's just, I don't know if it's because of where I'm constantly driving, like up and down towards his house, but the timing is weird, and I've passed him like three days in a row now. I've seen him. Yeah. Super fucking random. Like we're literally
do you think there's like a ginger vortex?
Yes. There is.
Do you think there's vortex? Like we should check the astrology, the moon, we'll ask the crystals. Is there something happening with the ginger field right now?
It's a big deal. The ginger vortex is going on right now. What's the date? You know what's funny?
It's going on right now. Yeah.
You know what's funny is I woke up this morning and I chose to be spicy. And I said to Danae, because I was just trying to trick her, I was like, do you know what day it is? You know?
Well, she was like, yeah.
She was like, payday? And I was like, bitch, you're not wrong. But no. And then I was like, no, do you know what day it is? But it's Ginger Day. It's obviously a special Ginger Day.
You know what? We're starting it here, folks. If you have a ginger friend, you call them up, you send them a text, you even write them a letter, and you tell them what you appreciate about them and their like spicy little ginger ass.
Yes. And give them love.
Oh, Ginger Day.
Oh, do we have a Ginger Day? I thought we did.
We do now.
Okay. Hey, Siri. Oh, she never works for me. How are you? What's going on? I feel like we're doing a catch-up moment, but it could be fun. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You know what? Okay. This might be a bit of off-road. I am well. My mental health is strong. I have been, and even beforehand, it's been quite strong. And I know that sounds so silly in so many ways because it's like, I know that like often people's mental health, well, yes and no. I was going to say people's mental health is just like, yeah, that is usually is strong, but actually no, especially as of lately. But I'm not a human that has had a history of just being able to say like, my mental health is strong, solid, and grounded. I have to work really, 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 really hard to have, I have to work really hard to be a person that just feels grounded and centered. Mm-hmm. And I just do. And so I've also, I know you mentioned in past episodes, your lion's mane. I've been doing lion's mane, saffron. Yes. Like it is a natural supplement essentially for your mental health. And there's been tons of studies done on it, that it has like the same effect as like antidepressants sort of thing.
Okay.
And like, it usually takes about 5 weeks for you to take a notice. And I felt very grounded before that I've been taking it, but I've also been like, anything, I want to know my recipe. And that's what I've been really narrowing down my entirety of my life, is like, what is my recipe for my mental health that gives me clarity, that makes me feel optimistic and grounded, I guess. And it doesn't mean that it's out of an avoidance of feeling the other tough feelings. It's just a matter of those feelings not feeling overwhelming, or that those other tough feelings be the thing that kind of like stack and take me down for a period of time. And so over time, I'm finding, like my morning routine, making sure to get exercise, gratitude, fresh air, breathing fresh air. Even in the morning, I'll go stand on the balcony just to breathe the fresh air for 5 minutes or something like that. Saffron, lion's mane, those are the new things that are added in, like stretching, moving through, making sure if there's heavy things going on with friends or family or clients, which is kind of always happening, that I'm doing movement and getting that energy moving through my body, and doing nervous system work right now, where I'm getting oppressed and suppressed energy cultivated and up and out of my body. And so I feel like a new human. I really do.
You're doing all these things and I'm loving it.
Yeah. So it's like paying off, and I've been stacking. Like, I didn't just like, as anyone that listens to this, you don't just like start it all at one time, right? Because it's just too overwhelming. So I've been like compounding over years and years and years, scaffolding, starting off with one thing, getting, your baseline with it all, and then building and building. And so the nervous system, and then these two supplements are my newest thing that I have scaffold on to my daily work well-being regime. And I feel really fucking fantastic.
I'm just in love with this. Oh, wait a second. The scaffolding, what are the original feelings that happen for you, so I can better understand, that brought you to feeling like really good right now? Like, what was it before, again, if I can just get a reminder?
So like before I started to feel quite solid and quite grounded in it. It was a lot of feeling just overwhelmed. And this was like most of my life. Really noticing a lot of the suffering and the disconnect from other people, and then even myself, around how they were feeling about day-to-day life, and the like overwhelming kind of like all the tough stuff, hard stuff, whether that was like within their jobs or relationships or within themselves. And it was always just this feeling of like, what's the fucking point? Like, it was always this just like, what the fuck is going on? Like, what is going on? And it all felt just so insanely heavy. And so I became a very irritable person, a very angry person, even though I was very joyful on the outside in many ways, and I could find the humor and I could have fun, there was always this like extreme undercurrent of heaviness, and always just like keeping my nose above the depression. And when I would go into depression, which was quite often in my teens and 20s, I would call it like temporary amnesia. I couldn't really feel anything for anybody or anything. Like a sunset that usually would bring me awe, I would just be like, I know that's beautiful, but it wouldn't penetrate. I couldn't feel it within myself. And so it would feel like I was trapped in like a prison within myself. And so over the years, for about 6 years now, I haven't had depression, but I've had to work really hard to stay ahead of it, kind of thing, by like focusing on all the beautiful things, simple things about life, really tapping into like what a like honor it is to even be living this life, as messy and difficult and challenging that it all is. That the fact that you're even here is so like 1 in a trillion. So and that like, because we do get so caught up in the shit that just doesn't matter, we are training our brain to look at all the random crap that doesn't matter. So I've been training my brain to notice all the really simple beauties. And that's also shifted drastically, in which I feel the like, oof, the heavy stuff.
Yeah.
But now, and then also all my work around emotional regulation, I've always been able to take all the angry and irritable moments and regulate them. But as of lately, I don't feel the angry, irritable moments. So like those aren't coming. So I'm not having to regulate those things. And in other moments that like I do get irritable, which is kind of far and in between right now, that's fine because I have all my tools to emotionally regulate myself, right? How to like zoom out on it. Right. If I need to go take a deep breath, if I need to get a little fresh air, if I need to, whatever I need to do to not let the train leave the station of the runaway emotion. Right. And then decide what to do on the other side of it. But right now what's taking place with this nervous system work with, mostly it's the nervous system work I've noticed is like, I just feel really calm and I just feel really grounded and clear. And I don't have to, I'm still doing all the work. I'm still doing all the things, but those are just my habits, like what I do in the morning, right?
Yeah.
What I do throughout the day. But I feel light in a way that I have never experienced in my life yet. Like to date, really I have never felt that. Big deal. Yeah, because I that's why when you say like how you doing, I'm like in good in a way that like this is a whole new terrain for me. This is a new world. Cool. And so I just think like that's why I say I'm just constantly being like, what's the next part of this recipe that is my well-being as a human? And the great thing too is like I get to take all of this and then I get to plug that into my work with the kids that I work with. Like, what's your recipe? And like, what do you find for yourself that brings you centered and joy and well-being and a regulation and stuff for their journey into their adult or their later life and so forth?
It's so funny. I always remember when my dad used to take me to the AA meetings and they'd always be like, it's just one day at a time. And I never really like took so much weight into it as a little kid. I'd always just like, if my dad was having a hard time, I'd always just be like, come on, Dad, like one day at a time. And now that I'm older, I'm literally like one day at a time for everything, emotions, work, friends, like if something comes up. And I just think it's so cool that you're able to like, scaffold, like you were saying. And I think it starts with like one day at a time. You just got to make that move. As difficult as it can be, I think it's just like, but it's really fucking hard. Like, I can't imagine how hard it was for you to one day just be like, you know what, I'm going to start with one thing and then I got to be persistent and then I got to do the next thing and be persistent. So, it takes a years, like you said, of work to do, but obviously it's paying off. So
yeah, like, and too, you said something that in that we're sold such an idea that the quick results.
Yeah.
And so we kind of are like, well, it's not working. Mm-hmm. This isn't working. That's not working. And it's like, well, you've just only planted the seed and then you're pissed off because you can't see any growth. Like the roots have to first go, like there's so much stuff that takes place underground before you see any results.
Yeah.
And I think gratitude is one of the only things that you can almost have immediate results within, like the serotonin hit. And like, obviously there's dopamine hit things, but like long lasting life building elements that kind of change literally your internal mapping, if you will, and your neurological mapping, how your system quite literally works and getting the viruses out so you're not so fucking glitchy. Is that recognizing that it's like it's going to be a slow burn, and recognizing like every day I'm constantly kind of saying like, well, what do I want to do today so that I'm feeding how I want to feel tomorrow? Yeah. And it doesn't look perfect, but it's that like having the commitment where it's the, I guess, fully understanding that like there's no way around it. Like you can't have the results unless you put in the consistency enough to like actually cultivate and grow the results. So I kind of use nature a lot of times as my representation to remind myself. And the other thing too is like, once we feel good, we have that I did that for most of my teens and 20s. I would work my ass off to get out of depression. I would do all the work, and then I would feel good. And then I would let the work go on the wayside because I felt good, because the point of it at the time was to feel good. And that's no longer the point, is just to feel good. It's understanding that this is the deal when you come into this world in these human forms, is like, these are the systems that you have to upkeep. And if you do not take care of them, they will not take care of you. It is a like collaboration. And that because you feel good, that should be your proof to keep going, not your excuse to let it go to the wayside. And so that's the other thing too, is like, that's why too I've been able to get finally to this, because it's almost like, you know, once the little greeneries sprouted above the soil and then you stop watering it, well, it's not going to grow into the full plant or tree or whatever it is. It's going to die. And then you're going to have to replant the seed. And so it's one of those things where I'm like, ooh, now it's kind of like, well, what else could I grow within myself and on my, you know, like what? And so I just look at it as like, I'm just going to keep feeding this organism that is my, you know, avatar Laurie, and see what all the things that can grow within me at the end of this life. And so it's taken on this completely different mindset and viewpoint of my well-being and mental health. And you know, I'm pretty blown away at where it's at right now. And it'll be steps backwards, steps forward. Like growth is not linear. And that's also the thing that's like really helped me, because sometimes I'm like, but I felt so different, and what the fuck? And then I was just like, dude, it's just a day or a week, or like, and that's okay. You just keep doing the work. And also some of those days are where you're like, well, then double down on the work. Like, double down, walk a little. Like I had really high anxiety, and when I say anxiety, not worry, just like intense vibrational energy moving through me. A lot of my nervous system work that I've been doing, you'll get these like insane amounts of energy that you're quite literally like oppressed energy from childhood and so forth, that because energy or emotion is energy in motion. And if you're not allowed as children, which most of us weren't allowed to feel that feeling, that emotion, where does that energy go? If it can't be expressed and released, it gets pushed down and suppressed and oppressed, and it stays within your body. And so a lot of times that's why when something happens in our lives and you get a little bit frustrated, or sorry, it should be a little frustration, you get super frustration. We call them like our triggers.
Right.
It's because it's touching and it's activating that emotion that you haven't been able to like release, right? So it's like trying to escape you. So instead of a little wave of emotion, we're having like a tidal wave of emotion.
A lot, right?
And that person's like, whoa, like, why so, you know? And so doing it in a healthy way, not waiting till and then a lot of times we push it down because we'll blame and this and this and that. And so now we're creating more emotion around it rather than just being like, oh, what's there? And getting curious about what triggered that. Like, where does that stem from to release it, right?
Yeah.
And so doing it in a healthy way, which I myself have a few different ways that I do it, because there's a bunch of different modalities. But I also go to this incredible guy, Dr. Suki, who's like a chiropractor, and he does a lot of like energy moving healing stuff. And so it's been huge. And so after my appointments, I have a lot of energy that I, in a healthy way and in an open way, am moving through my body. So it feels like, and technically would be like, well, maybe not technically, but it's like anxiety, because you feel like you're just vibrating inside because all this energy is moving through you. And so I went to the
part of your scaffolding. Is this part of your? Okay.
Yeah. He's part of. Yeah, he's definitely. This is part of my nervous system work. Is going to him now. I just had a session yesterday, so it'll probably it's usually within about like 12 to 24 hours, it starts. And I have crazy dreams after my session too, because my brain is processing the energy I'm excavating. So I have these crazy fucking dreams and shit too. Super aggressive dreams, actually, because it's like a lot of my anger is moving through me because that's where like I get triggered, right? Is I manifested a lot of my emotions into anger because I was in my fight, flight, or freeze response. I was a fighter. That was my natural tendency. And so thus why I'm feeling more peaceful, because all this oppressed energy that's kind of residually within myself is being released in a healthy way. So I'm just more centered because I don't have this intense energy that's kind of sitting within me that always has been throughout my life, right? When I first pushed it down, right? In childhood.
Right.
And then obviously, just like we scaffold healthy things, we can scaffold unhealthy things. And, and you end up like compounding energy within your body. And this isn't woo-woo shit. It sounds like it's woo-woo shit, but like science is behind this. Like if you, all these experts on the nervous system, like they talk all about it. So this isn't just, and this isn't just the only work. Like I attend incredible online conferences around trauma and the nervous system, big trauma, compounding trauma, because we all have it to some extent, right? It's when you were not safe in the feeling that you had, and therefore your instinct and your survival pushed it all down, right? To like it was like, I'll keep safe, I'll contain, and all the things. It's a really silly or simple way that doesn't describe it well, but
no, I mean, it makes perfect sense. So if you were somebody out there that wanted to start doing something like this and was feeling like maybe it's really hard to do, like where would you start? Like what is the first steps to getting on the scaffolding plan?
I think getting really curious is the most important thing, because you can't really get behind anything and you won't put it into real practice unless you understand closer to what's going on for you as a human, and why you might be showing up in the way that you're showing up, and why you feel so out of control within yourself, or how you respond, and recognizing, getting a little bit more information. And there's so many experts out there. And so kind of trying on for size, just going on YouTube, finding a speaker or an expert on it that speaks, in a way that like you understand the way that they explain it, their humor, maybe their voice, like someone that you're like, oh, that's someone that can translate for me in a way that I understand. And first get really curious about it. And a lot of them will explain different modalities like acupuncture, going to somebody that can, like if you're super spiritual and you like that, then you can go to like Reiki, energy healers, all those different things. If you're much more in the sense of like, so you want really science-based, then you might be going to somebody that is like a neuroscientist, or not you wouldn't go to a neuroscientist, but like therapy kind of thing, but like not just talk therapy, but, whatever it looks like. But even just things of like, there's certain things of like shaking your hands out. Like if you feel like you get those bigger feelings, actually just shaking your hands, like something as simple as that is like putting little tools in your toolbox so like shaking your hands, it's moving the energy within your body through you and out, sort of thing. Even darting your eyes back and forth, because it's something that has been proven now. It's something that like has been studied around evolutionary. When we felt threats, we would be looking for the threat, and darting our eyes back and forth actually tells the brain that we are taking action and that we are safer than we think we are. And so it's essentially saying like, okay, I've checked, I've made sure there's but it's like darting your eyes left to right, left to right, left to right. And this is like Andrew Huberman has spoken about this, like top people in neuroscience, right?
Right.
Around how, when it's coming up in the moment. But so kind of going back to the original
I was
thing.
trying to tell my mom that I wasn't rolling my eyes at her, stupid bitch. I knew it. I knew I was channeling my inner Andrew Hubert. And anyway, so she slapped me around, and now she can go fuck herself.
Yeah. I think actually, no, that is a form of contempt, is when you roll your eyes. That's not darting your eyes, that's rolling your eyes. That's a completely different. Okay. Yeah. So, but I loved your reach on that one.
Let's not give it to
That's not showing this episode. But yeah, I would say just start getting curious, because that's the other thing too, is like we immediately are like, oh, if this is going to help me, then I'll do this thing that was mentioned. And that's great. But like, as humans, to really like, because the work gets tough and sometimes it's not fun to do and all the things. So if you are just doing it because you want one more thing that might make you feel better. Unless you really understand why you're doing it, how it affects you, and where you want to begin, and it's your choice, that's like, oh, that sounds like where I would like to begin. What works for me is like, you just won't do the work. You just won't. And so getting really curious, and so starting to look closer at what are the types of things that you feel like you get a lot of emotion around, listening to different speakers on things like the nervous system, on things on mental health, and start just following your breadcrumbs, trying things, staying consistent with them long enough to see if they actually have value for you. Yeah. And then if they really don't, and I'm talking like sometimes it's a solid like 2 to 3 months before you'll see any results. And it might just be the smallest little leaf that sprouts kind of thing. And then, but once you feel like you've got a handle on that, add another thing. And, or let that one go and add something. But I would even say just hold on to that thing. Because likely if it's something that like science can back is something that's beneficial, you just keep fucking doing it. Because coming from somebody that, like, I mean, really has struggled my entire life with mental health. Every day in one way or another, it's been some sort of micro or major battle. I remember looking at David the Kitchen like a few weeks ago. I was like, man, is this just how you feel in a day? Oh, like, you know, and he's like, yeah. I was like, oh, I thought maybe, like, you know, you think, because I look at people and I'm like, I think you just feel pretty good, you know, like, doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that you don't feel stress. It doesn't mean that you don't feel fear. It doesn't mean that you don't feel disappointment. It doesn't mean that you don't feel grief. It doesn't mean that you don't feel, but you feel it in an appropriate capacity. Yeah. Yeah. And then with the other tools of being able to emotionally regulate, you also have the tools to not then hold on to it longer than is needed, or add other additives that make it a bigger feeling than appropriate to the situation. Right. Yeah. Almost so like everything becomes more manageable. Yeah. When somebody feels happy all the time, or manageable, or they don't have or suffer from depression, there's I guess, like, if for myself, because I don't suffer from depression, I'm not sure, I've never been diagnosed with anything, but I don't think I have mental illness. But there's definitely days where, like, say for example, like if like when my best friend passed away, or my dad passed away, and then like a year down the road, and like everything's really tough, and you're having like a really hard time, and you're just like, I'm not sure I can leave the house right now, and you feel very suffocated. I can imagine it would feel very similar to that every day. Yeah, it really so when I experienced like deep grief, I wasn't depressed, but I wrote in about it and, you know, mentioned it, where I was like, this is exactly like depression. Like the deep grief. This is like what depression feel like is. And and I when I studied grief, because anything now that I'm just like, I want to, because if I have information, I have a bit more of an understanding of where to go from here. If I know where my starting point is, then at least I have an understanding, not a roadmap, but at least I have a clearer path than just like going in circles and chasing my tail. And so that's really helped me as well, is like information really is power, I believe. And so, yeah, that was like the closest I had felt to depression in a very long time. And it was a bit scary too, because it made me, I had to really be conscious to not have the runaway train of fear that this was going to then take me into depression. Right. So I had to really be on top of all of my daily work that keeps me in a state that knew where it was grief and where it was self-inflicted suffering. So say like harboring on certain things that made me feel guilty about how I should have and could have showed up in those times where the people that passed away that I, if only I would have done that. And you're like, well, no, that's, us as humans, that's what we do, but you have to really catch it because it can be a runaway train that is a part of the grief, but is a unhelpful part of the grief.
Right. Yeah.
Because there's really helpful parts of the grief and there's unhelpful parts of grief.
Yeah.
And then there's parts of grief that can get you stuck in the grief, which is no longer the grief, which is now depression. So that's why it gets really tricky and it's really complex. And the same way with, there's so many different kind of areas in which certain things within life can be just life hardships that can trigger your mental health. Because if there's not clarity around, this is just a really difficult moment that I need to stay within. When you've had depression and you've had anxiety or you've had any of those things, your brain can want to protect yourself and your nervous system, all those things, and being like, no, don't slip back into that. Like, and then you're like, it's okay, dude. Like saying to myself, like, it's okay. Wow. It's just like, you're just having a sad day. It's just a sad day. But when you've experienced 10 months where your soul feels lost within your container that is your body and your mind, and you feel like, I remember one time in one of my deeper moments in my depression, I lived in Edmonton at the time, and it was very, very dark time, and it felt like hopeless, like really, really hopeless. And even cognitively, I say cognitively in the sense of like, I knew and understood I was in depression, and I knew and understood that this was temporary in many ways, or likely was temporary, because it was about 9 months in, it was starting to worry that, because I'd never gone that long with a depressive episode. And so it scared me into thinking maybe this time it was different and this wasn't so temporary.
Right.
And I remember laying naked on my sofa. I had asked Dave, I just said, I just need alone time. I need you to just because I need a lot of alone time, not to because a lot of times in depression, you want to just hibernate. And that was true for this moment. But for me to process, a lot of times I just need no one else's energy. I need no one else in my space to just process. And I was in the dark and I was just crying, and I was laying naked on the sofa, and I just couldn't even have clothes on my body. And I just remember thinking this is as dark as it's ever gotten. And I remember feeling like the walls were closing in on me. And so I just had to get out of the house, and we had the balcony, and this was winter time, very, very cold. I remember that night, and I went outside and I felt the coolness, but I couldn't feel the cold. And I remember just having a blanket around my waist and just crying in the cold on the balcony. And I remember thinking, do I need to check myself in to a mental facility? And I think I might, this might be the cusp of me actually losing my mind, and how very real that was. And that, and this is again, at this point, I was reading the things, I was doing much of the work. I didn't have gratitude yet and understood those pieces. It was more to do with understanding what was happening with my brain and body, in the depressive episode. Laurie? I would have been 20. I think I was 26. Okay. About 26. Okay. This really long episode. My first episode with depression was 15, 16. And Dave came home, and he came out onto the balcony, and he just sat with me. And and at this point I had done antidepressants in my early 20s, and they just were not something that I personally felt I wanted to take, because me personally, I felt as though they numbed parts that I needed to look at. Because anytime, I personally believe that depression is your kind of your spirit kind of trying to speak to you, but all of your conditioning and all of the noise from the world and the emotion and the feeling and trying to hold on to an ideal or an idea of self and the world in such a disconnect, and your spirit and soul so desperately trying to connect to you, but not knowing how.
Right.
And the depression taking place as the like, in being such a duress state. I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly from myself. And again, this is my personal experience of my depression, because every time I've come out of depression, I've had these huge fucking aha moments, like huge, that are life-changing in the end. And I'm able to get those now without the depressive episodes, but because of these other healthy tools, right? Like the work I'm doing and stuff like that right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And within about 2 days, I had one of my biggest aha moments that kind of came, and all of a sudden I could see with so much clarity, so much of my childhood and so much of my youth, of all the ways that I felt about myself, that or thought about myself and thought about the world. It was like a veil kind of got lifted, blinders got taken off, and I'm just like manically writing it down, right? Like all the aha. And it took about a month after that for it to continually release. But it was like the precipice in which I actually, and any times that I've still had a lot of aha moments, they come with a lot of discomfort. The only difference is now they don't come with depression.
Right.
But there's this battle that I believe is happening in so many of us from all the bullshit that we're taught. Mm-hmm. From all the lies, the conditioning, the disassociation, the detachment, the suppression and oppression around emotions, vulnerability, to that's weakness and all those things, where like that's our strengths. Yeah. That's our wisdom, is on the other side of emotions, is to actually process the feeling, and then what comes and cultivates after that. Not to go out and express your feelings on everybody, right? Because if we're walking around and everyone's just like allowing their feelings to dictate your life, no, it's like allowing the emotion in a safe and healthy place to be felt and processed. And then there's the wisdom on the other side. Right. And so when I wasn't feeling the feelings in a healthy way, and the oppression and the suppression of them, it's like a volcano, and the volcano erupts, and that's my depression. And so when I took medication, that just pushed it further down. And so even though the volcano never erupted, I still felt all the same like uneasiness, and something's not. And then noticing that like everybody's walking around and it's not matching up to what they're actually feeling. Like I watched it in adults, everyone's saying they were okay, but clearly seeing you're not okay, watching the drinking, watching the way that people would talk about one another, the way they talk about themselves, and being like, what is happening? Yeah. And in many ways I look back and I'm thankful for my depression. I'm only because it came because I was just one of the humans that was unwilling to live by the status quo. My depression was the way in which, because I had no other healthy way to do it, it was the way in which it was forced to be processed. But now that I have all these healthy ways of processing, I'm able to have the clarity. I'm able to see that, yes, we are disconnected and we are disassociated, and we are, we have all these unhealthy attachment, and we are oppressing, and we are doing those things. And it's leading us just insane health crisis, mentally and physically and, emotionally. But I'm able to do it without having to have an eruption. Right. I'm able to do it in a way that is like, I'm able to have these small, medium, manageable discomforts. Yeah. And then taking the wisdom that comes with the other side. Thus why when I have those tough days or I have those moments, I actually look at them now rather than, moments of that fear that would kick up and be like, oh, the depression's coming. I'm like, oh, there's something here that's trying to talk to me. Something's trying to speak to me. I'm going to stop and listen. I'm going to go for that forest walk for 2 hours. I'm going to walk out the energy and I'm going to listen to what it's trying to speak.
Yeah.
And so I'm living more clearly and more grounded because, and the not wanting to have depression or ever experience and being so committed to not feeling that way and struggling with my mental health. It's funny. It's like my desire to live clearly led to my mental health and depression because there was no other modalities and healthy ways to figure that out.
Yeah.
And then my desire to see clearly and my desire to not live with mental illness led to my clarity, but a healthy well-being.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Like,
wow,
the depression came from the knowingness that this is not the way we're meant to live.
Right.
But I didn't have a healthy way to uncover that. So I had to go bushwhacking because there was no pre-paved path. There was no one that showed me. There was nothing that told me anyways when I was a kid or growing up. I had wonderful parents, but they didn't have the tools either.
No.
Not really. And then being like, but why do I have to have my aha moments? Why do I have to get my clarity through this like horrific mental illness? That's fucked up too. That can't be it. And so then I started my breadcrumbs of how do I find my clarity through a healthier way of going about things. And then that led me to understanding the brain, understanding the body, understanding all these like ancient ways, present ways, all the things. And then I'm like, holy shit. Like I'm living how my younger kid self was like, there's got to be a different way. And then now I'm entering my 40s being like, I fucking found the different way. Not like me, I found the way that no one knows about, but like for me as an individual, it's like I came out on the other side. And now I just get to build now that it's no longer about figuring out how to not go into depression or once now that I am a healthy minded person, like sky's the limit on now what I get to do with who I am as a person and who I've always been able to cultivate. But I wasn't able because I spent so much of my life disassociated from that because of the conditioning of the world that taught me to do so. So now I get to live from a very connected to myself as like my spirit to Laurie. And I'm just like, oh, shit's going to get real cool from here on out and creative. Yeah. And that's really exciting because so much energy had to go towards finding, creating this like super highway to well-being for myself. And I'm still doing, I'll still be doing it for sure for the rest of my life. But like now that I'm like, oh, I can take all that energy and now I get to plug that into all the creativity, because that's the other thing too, that we don't realize is like your brain's first and your brain and body's first job is to keep you safe and is to survive. And if you aren't feeling safe within your body and your mind, then it closes itself off to creativity. It closes itself off. You might still have access to, but only so much because it's not in a space and place where your brain wants to learn or take in or cultivate because it's going, I got to survive. My first job is to survive. And so only when you feel safe and you feel like, okay, then your energy and your brain capacity and focus can go towards exploration, imagination, creativity, all those different things. So all that energy that's putting into being safe or feeling like you're safe. And that doesn't have to look necessarily just like mental health. That can be things like at your job. If you feel like you're in an imposter syndrome or that you're not quite qualified or the people are snarky or whatever it looks like, in a certain level, you're in a space and place of survival, safety. And so you're not going to be able to fully, jump into the reason you were hired to begin with, like expertise, or if you are in a flow state or creativity any of those things, because you're having to swap back and forth between, am I safe? Okay, I am. Now I can, oh wait, but I don't feel safe because Joe just walked into the room and he doesn't make me feel like comfortable or whatever. So the more that you're centered in yourself and the more that you're not taking other people's things on as your own or projecting, you know, all those different things. And the more that you're just centered and you know your boundaries, or you know what you feel about yourself, or, you know, your capacity, or you trust, or whatever it is, the more your energy and your focus can live in this creative space, imaginative space, flow state. Right. And that's where like this paradise of when the realities of tough stuff aren't happening, then we get to live in this other beautiful, beautiful, beautiful space. But so few of us are ever really living there, because we're walking around in the conditioning and the disassociation, and essentially living so much of our life in this like protective state. Even if we're not mentally ill, we're still living in a space of like, oh, well, am I, aren't I? Am I, aren't I? Am I, aren't I? Everything's flooded of why we're not enough.
Right.
There's a reason for that, to disconnect us from self so that we're not in a space of creation. We're not in a space that we're going to, you know, really build a beautiful thing. We wouldn't be as controllable. We wouldn't be as susceptible to the, I know that goes, I went on a million tangents, but it's the truth. It's like, you know, it's like why because I watched as a little girl and I was like, this shit's not adding up. As a little kid, I was like, this shit is not fucking adding up.
Right. Does that mean, do you think that's because you have like you're more connected to like your emotional side, or maybe your thought side? Like, is there like a system in which the body for you goes, my gut feels bad and this needs to be handled? Or is it like my brain triggers that this isn't connecting? Like, because sometimes I feel like some people are like, I feel physically ill and I'm not sure if I'm in the right spot, because they can't really mentally get there. And then they follow that path. But for you, I feel like you're some sort of like emotional scientist.
It was originally emotional, 100% intuition. It was like my soul and spirit knew that what I was being fed was bullshit.
Yeah.
From the school systems, from the adult world, from all, it just didn't add up. But it was like, well, I guess, I don't know. They're the authority on it. And then it was just one of those things where I was like, none of this is adding up. Like, it's not. And it was all instinct and gut, but I couldn't make sense of it. And so then it became later on following the breadcrumbs of what the fuck is going on here. And so it wasn't until I was much older. I say in like much older is it like my early 20s. And then that's where it really started, of like my going into the actual, like, what's going on in the brain, what's going, and kind of looking at human behavior and studying human behavior to better understand, and putting those two together, of making sense of it for my gut feeling that this was fucked up. Because as a child, what I would do is I would process it through rebellion. I would process it through big, aggressive emotions, to tell those adults or friends or whoever it was to like, back the fuck up, because I knew that this didn't feel right, but I had no skills as to, so that's how I went about it, was a lot of aggression and a lot of like rebellion and a lot of stubbornness, because it was like, just don't let them move you, Laurie. Just don't let them move you. Don't let them, and, even like my friends would be smoking cigarettes in grade 7 out in the alleyway, and I would be eating my bologna sandwich. But I was like, I don't want to smoke cigarettes. And they were like, why are you out here? I was like, because I also don't want to hang out by myself inside. So I was always very stubborn. Like, you weren't going to, you were not, there was going to be never peer pressure. Really. There was everything my friends were doing, unless I actually wanted to do it or I was curious about it, you weren't budging me, And so it definitely was all gut at the beginning and emotional. And then later down the road, I really turned to intellect to understand it. And the more I understood it, the more, and it wasn't confirmation bias, because there was a lot of things that I had to really tough stuff that I had to look at, which I believe to be true, which weren't.
Right. You know, it's
Around
a very
what?
lonely world
Yeah.
though, Laurie, because like I feel
Oh,
like there's only
yeah.
a certain percentage of people that think this way. And the rest of us are just like, I don't feel good, but fuck it. You know, I don't feel good, but I'm just gonna have a drink. I don't feel good, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Everybody's doing it. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna do it anyway. Like I feel you because I feel like I'm the same person as you. I feel like every time I tried to get involved in something, I'd find myself being
Yeah.
like, this doesn't feel good. And then I wouldn't be invited to those things, or I'd be like, I don't want to do
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Right. And then you get
Yes.
older and you're like, you know what? I think I'm pretty good. I feel like there's like this 1% that's like, I'm thinking too much. But are you? You know, maybe
You
you just
know,
have that extra something.
you just said it of like, as you get older, I see a lot of my friends and friends, family, all the people that like played by the rules, if you will, or I don't even know if it was played by the rules as much as like couldn't
Just
see
like,
it for
fuck it.
themselves. And
Yeah.
and there's a big price that's being paid today, that they're feeling exceptionally lost. They're feeling exceptionally disconnected. There's like, now they're asking the whys. They're doing the like, what the fuck? This doesn't add up.
Right.
And that's a really tough thing. You know, it's called a midlife crisis for many, right? Like it's everyone uses that midlife crisis in a context of like, oh, so that means you're going to like go out and live in like you're in your 20s again, but it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that might be the unhealthy way you go about it. But like the midlife crisis is going like, I've checked all the
real.
Boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Am I good? Am I happy? Or who am I? Just like, who am I? Just asking, where I was asking those questions as a teenager. And you're right. It was a very, very lonely road because even though I had friends and I had loving, amazing people, I felt always like Dave was my first human that I ever was around that I didn't feel alone, because he just kind of like quietly just like allowed so much space for me to just go and do all this and be everything. And he was just like, you do you, where like everyone's just like thinking, everyone else is just thinking too much. Like, like, why do you always got to take everything so deep, and it was like, I don't know how you all aren't thinking so deep. Like, it was like, how can you not see things? It was almost like everybody was seeing things pixelated and I was seeing things in like HD.
Right.
And I'm taught, especially as a teenager, or my early 20s. And not everybody, like I did have some friends that were going through their things and asking, but I definitely felt very lonely in that of like, why do I have to take things and see things, so deeply? And then also really, and this is really tough for me and I'm really working hard on it. This is like a big part of my stage at the moment, is really, really not just understanding it in my mind, but like embodying the understanding that like everybody is going at their own pace. Everybody is doing the absolute best that they can, even if it looks like it's shit. It is the best that they can. And with what they got and where they're at and who they are and all the things. And that just means you might need to take that information and create a different, like move accordingly. Doesn't mean that you are like, well, then I just, need to be sucked into that.
Before.
Yeah. Right. So it's like, you take that as information. But it's like really having also radical grace for everybody where they are at that place in time. Because I know I've been technically truly at this in a working fashion since I've been about, I would genuinely say about 14 years old.
Right.
In one way or another, right? I was at and we're all at different starting places too, right? Depending on like socioeconomic, how you were raised, the gender you were raised, the color of your skin, the family dynamics, the like culture,
there's lots.
There's so many things, right? That people have different starting points. as well too, right? Like, and so even generational trauma, like your cellular levels, you're quite literally born more susceptible to mental health, to your nervous system, quite literally cellular aspects of what happened to your grandparents are in your cells.
Jeez.
And in your nervous system. So you have triggers that didn't even come from your existence. And that's a real thing. So that's why that whole thing of like breaking generational trauma. Or generate cycles and stuff like that is a real thing. It's fucking mind-blowing and fascinating, but it's exception. That's why I say like knowledge is power, because the more you understand it, the more you decide where your starting point is. And then you might even be like, ooh, this starting point's way too ahead of it. I got to go even further back and start even more simply. Which might be like just going outside and getting fresh air in the morning, right?
I love that. But I think where we end it is that, just like starting somewhere. It's so hard to do, but so important. So fucking important. And
I think it's our life's work.
It ain't easy, man. You know, it ain't easy. I had my shit like literally 2 days ago. I was in a panic, and literally it took my partner being like, let's just go to the dog park. And it took about an hour for me to get out of it.
Yes.
And it was brutal, but I finally walked out of the dog park being like, I'm okay right now. I'm all right. So starting somewhere, I think, is the biggest message. And I just love it. So, yeah.
And that's just it, is like doing something as simple as that. Of recognizing where you're at and not ignoring it, but doing something just simple. And then even just simple. Like noting, like, how did that work? Like, just like the same thing in that forest, right? I walked until that energy vibration, like anxious energy, was out. And it was like, I walked for an hour and I was like, nope, still there. So I walked for 2 hours, you know, and was like, okay, now I can, and you might be like, I don't have 2 hours to walk in a forest. And you're like, no. Or like but it can be just going like in the fresh air and feeling the crispness of the air on your lungs. Like it can be just those things that you start and recognize that you feel differently with an actionable item.
Try new things.
And just test on like
work. Coffee in the morning, getting the
splash water on your face, like in the morning, like something and anything. And but start to go down your journey and recognize that like it's a slow burn. It's small steps that you keep building on and scaffolding on, and you just kind of build one brick at a time. Boop, 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 boop. But like from somebody that, you know, really, really genuinely didn't want to participate in life for the first 25 years of her life, to somebody that gets up every single morning really excited for my day, even though there's nothing necessarily, like there's no big thing in the day, that it's not only possible, because if I could like really truly like where I was at in my mental health, if I could get to this place, anyone can fucking get to this place, so long as in some capacity or another, I guess. Like I've had a lot of privileges, I've had a lot of support, but even if you find the crack of light, you just keep following that and keep adding and adding and adding and widening that crack of light. And if you're just somebody that you're like, I'm pretty good though, I live great, still build, still like it's, I believe truly, 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 we all have different starting points, but that it is our life's work as a human being. So get curious, start somewhere, be consistent, look at it as like, I'm not doing this to feel good. I'm doing this because like me as a human being, my life kind of depends on it in its own right.
Yeah, totally.
Because it does. Well, that was a very different off-road, folks, but meant to be, because Krissy and I were always going to talk about this subject to one way or the other. So we fucking did it.
We gonna did it. We gonna did done it.
We gonna did done. Okay, well, my friends, that is your motivation.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Ciao.
I love you. I don't know how to exit this, but we'll find out. Bye. You just listened to the Motovation Podcast with your host, Krissy Vann, and me, Laurie Joy Kingwell.
Thanks for joining us along the ride. We've got new episodes dropping every Monday, and we're all about community. So follow us on Instagram at Motovation Podcast and visit our website at themotovation.com.
And in the meantime, tanks full and full throttle.